Hold up. I'm hearing some crime sound going down big analysis. You know what? We screwcast your guy to see what's going down in LA right now.
Every generation remembers a crime that changes the way people see the world. Sometimes it's a robbery that makes people lock their doors. Sometimes it's a tragedy that changes airport security forever. And sometimes it's something so ordinary, so familiar, that no one ever imagined it could become a weapon. This is one of those stories. It was late September, 1982. Chicago was heading into autumn. The mornings were cool, the streets were busy, and for millions of Americans, life was continuing exactly as it always had. Parents were getting their children ready for school. Office workers were rushing to beat traffic. Pharmacies opened their doors as customers walked in to buy everyday essentials. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing suggested that within a matter of hours, one of the biggest criminal investigations in American history would begin. Back then, there was one name almost every family recognized: extra-strength Tylenol. Manufactured by Johnson & Johnson, it had become one of the most trusted pain relievers in the United States. Doctors recommended it. Hospitals stocked it. Parents kept it in their medicine cabinets. If you had a headache, you reached for Tylenol. If your child had a fever, you reached for Tylenol. It wasn't just another product. It represented trust. But trust can be broken in ways no one expects. Unknown to the public, several bottles sitting quietly on store shelves around the Chicago area had already been tampered with. They looked completely normal. The labels were intact. The capsules appeared untouched. There were no warning signs, no strange smell, no unusual color, nothing that would make a customer think twice before opening the bottle. Hidden inside a handful of those capsules was potassium cyanide, a poison so deadly that even a small amount could kill within minutes. The people who bought those bottles weren't chosen because of who they were. They weren't targeted because of personal grudges. They were complete strangers, ordinary people whose lives crossed paths with a product they believed they could trust. Over the next few days, 7 innocent people would die. The country would descend into panic. Millions of bottles would disappear from store shelves, and the pharmaceutical industry would never be the same again. More than 40 years later, one question still remains unanswered. Who did it? The morning of September 29th, 1982, began like any other Wednesday. In the quiet suburb of Elk Grove Village lived a 12-year-old girl named Mary Kellerman. She had woken up with what appeared to be nothing more than a sore throat and a mild fever. It wasn't unusual. Children become sick all the time. Her parents had no reason to think this day would be any different. Like countless families across America, they reached into their medicine cabinet for a product they had trusted for years: extra-strength Tylenol. It was supposed to help. It was supposed to bring relief. Mary swallowed one capsule with a glass of water. Within moments, everything changed. She suddenly became violently ill. Her condition deteriorated with terrifying speed. Her parents immediately knew something was terribly wrong. Panic filled the house as they called for emergency medical assistance. Paramedics rushed to the scene. Mary was transported to the hospital as doctors prepared to do everything they could to save her. But despite every effort, they couldn't. Only a short time after taking a single Tylenol capsule, Mary Kellerman was dead. Doctors were stunned. Healthy children don't simply collapse and die without explanation. Medical staff searched desperately for answers. Was it an undiagnosed illness? A severe allergic reaction? Some rare medical condition no one had detected? Nothing seemed to fit. There was no obvious explanation, no evidence of violence, no indication that anyone had committed a crime. At that moment, Mary's death appeared to be a heartbreaking medical mystery. No one, not her family, not the doctors, and not the police, suspected that the medicine she had taken just minutes earlier was responsible. While investigators quietly documented the case, life across Chicago continued as normal. Parents continued buying Tylenol. Children continued taking it for fevers. Adults carried bottles in their handbags, medicine cabinets, and office drawers. No warnings had been issued. No recalls had been announced, because no one yet understood that Mary Kellerman's death was only the beginning. Just hours after Mary's death, another tragedy unfolded. This time, it happened several miles away. 27-year-old Adam Janus worked for the United States Postal Service. On September 29th, Adam wasn't feeling well. After returning home from work, he reached for a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. He swallowed the capsules. A short time later, he suddenly collapsed. An ambulance was called immediately. Doctors fought to save him. But just like Mary, Adam Janus died without any clear explanation. 2 sudden deaths, 2 different people, 2 different communities. At first, investigators saw no reason to connect them. There was no obvious relationship between the victims. Different ages, different families, different locations. Nothing suggested that both tragedies were part of something much larger. But fate wasn't finished. No one realized that another unimaginable tragedy was about to unfold inside that very house. As doctors tried to understand what had taken Adam Janus's life, his family was dealing with a different kind of pain. The pain of losing someone they loved without warning. Relatives gathered at Adam's home to comfort one another. There were conversations filled with disbelief, questions that no one could answer. How could a healthy 27-year-old suddenly collapse and die? No one had any explanation. The family assumed Adam had suffered a sudden medical emergency. They had no reason to believe there was danger inside the house. As the evening went on, Adam's younger brother, Stanley Janus, developed a headache. His wife, Teresa Janus, also wasn't feeling well. Like millions of Americans would have done, they searched the house for pain relief. On the kitchen counter sat the same bottle of extra-strength Tylenol Adam had used earlier that day. There was nothing unusual about it. Stanley swallowed 2 capsules. Teresa took some as well. Within a short time, both began experiencing the same terrifying symptoms Adam had suffered. They suddenly became violently ill. Emergency services were called once again. The same family that had spent the day mourning one death was now watching 2 more loved ones fighting for their lives. Doctors worked desperately to save them, but it was already too late. Within hours, Stanley Janus and Teresa Janus were dead. 3 members of one family, gone in a single day. For investigators, this changed everything. 3 unexplained deaths inside the same household could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Something connected them. The question was, what? Detectives immediately returned to Adam's home. Every room was searched, every item was examined, food was collected, drinks were tested, prescription medications were documented. Then investigators found the bottle of extra-strength Tylenol sitting in the kitchen. It was collected as evidence and rushed to a laboratory. No one knew it yet, but inside that bottle was the answer investigators had been searching for. The bottle from the Janus home arrived at the laboratory under tight security. Scientists carefully removed several capsules. Each one looked exactly as it should. Bright red, white, perfectly manufactured. Nothing on the outside suggested they had been altered, but appearances can be deceiving. One capsule was opened. Instead of medicine, the laboratory technicians found white crystals. The sample was immediately tested. Moments later, the results came back. Potassium cyanide, an extremely toxic chemical capable of killing within minutes. The amount discovered inside the capsules wasn't accidental. Each capsule contained far more cyanide than a person could survive. Investigators immediately understood the horrifying reality. This wasn't contamination, it wasn't a manufacturing defect, it wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately opened the capsules, replaced the medicine with poison, and sealed them again. For the first time, the deaths were officially treated as murders. The discovery triggered an urgent search through hospital records across the Chicago area. Investigators began comparing recent unexplained deaths. Almost immediately, another name appeared: Mary Kellerman. Doctors re-examined the circumstances surrounding her death. The evidence pointed to the same conclusion. She had also taken extra-strength Tylenol shortly before collapsing. Then another victim, then another. One by one, the pieces began falling into place. By the end of the investigation's first stage, authorities confirmed that 7 people had died after taking poisoned extra-strength Tylenol capsules purchased from different stores around the Chicago metropolitan area. The victims had never met one another. They lived in different communities. They worked different jobs. Their only connection was a bottle of Tylenol. The realization sent shockwaves through law enforcement. This wasn't a targeted attack. Anyone could have become the next victim. Once authorities confirmed that Tylenol was responsible, there was no time to waste. The public had to be warned immediately. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Radio broadcasts carried emergency announcements. Newspapers rushed out special editions with frightening headlines. Police officers drove from pharmacy to pharmacy, removing bottles from shelves before more people could buy them. Residents were told one simple message: do not take extra-strength Tylenol. No matter where it was purchased, no matter when it was bought, do not open it, do not use it, throw it away. The warning spread across Chicago in a matter of hours. Then it spread across the United States. Fear replaced trust almost overnight. Medicine cabinets that had once represented safety suddenly became sources of suspicion. Parents rushed through their homes, collecting every bottle of Tylenol they could find. Many refused to take any over-the-counter medicine at all. Hospitals received thousands of phone calls from frightened citizens, asking whether medicines in their homes were safe. Pharmacists worked around the clock, answering questions they had never imagined hearing. Stores emptied their shelves. Customers walked away without buying anything. For the first time in modern American history, an everyday consumer product had become the center of a nationwide murder investigation. Meanwhile, detectives faced a terrifying question. If poisoned bottles had been placed inside multiple stores, who had done it? More importantly, how many more bottles were still sitting on shelves waiting for unsuspecting customers? The race to find the killer had officially begun, and every passing hour increased the possibility that someone else could unknowingly become the next victim. By the morning after the deaths were linked together, the investigation had grown into one of the largest criminal cases in American history. The Chicago Police Department was joined by the FBI, forensic scientists, toxicologists, and public health officials. Their first priority was simple: find out where the poison entered the product. Investigators carefully examined the manufacturing process, fearing the contamination had happened inside the factory. If that were true, thousands of bottles across the country could be deadly. But after extensive testing, they found no evidence of cyanide at the manufacturing plants. Instead, every poisoned bottle had been purchased from different stores around the Chicago area. The conclusion was chilling. Someone had tampered with the bottles after they reached store shelves. The killer had likely bought several bottles, replaced some of the medicine with potassium cyanide, and quietly returned them for unsuspecting customers to buy. It was a crime unlike anything investigators had seen before. There was no traditional crime scene, no eyewitnesses, no obvious suspect, only poisoned bottles scattered across different locations. Detectives retraced the victim's final movements, interviewed store employees, and followed thousands of leads. But despite the massive investigation, the person responsible remained unknown. While investigators searched for the killer, Johnson & Johnson faced the biggest crisis in its history. Tylenol was America's best-selling pain reliever, trusted by millions of families. Company executives had a difficult decision to make. Recall only the bottles connected to Chicago, or remove every bottle from shelves across the country. They chose the second option. More than 31 million bottles of Tylenol were recalled in a nationwide effort to protect consumers. The decision cost the company over $100 million, but public safety came first. Television and radio stations warned people not to take Tylenol capsules. Stores cleared their shelves, and millions of bottles were collected and destroyed. The company's response later became one of the most respected examples of crisis management in business history. The tragedy also changed the pharmaceutical industry forever. Tamper-evident packaging, foil seals, and protective shrink wrapping became the new standard. Today, every time you open a bottle of medicine and check the safety seal, you're seeing a direct result of the Tylenol poisonings. But despite the recall and one of the largest investigations in American history, the killer was still out there. As the investigation expanded, fear spread far beyond Chicago. Finding the killer was no longer just about solving 7 murders. It was about restoring public trust. The FBI joined local investigators, and thousands of tips flooded in from across the country. Every lead was investigated, every interview carefully reviewed. Most of them led nowhere. Then, investigators received a major breakthrough. An anonymous letter was sent to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million and claiming responsibility for the poisonings. The letter led authorities to a man named James W. Lewis. Lewis denied committing the murders, but investigators found enough evidence to charge him with attempted extortion. He was convicted and sent to prison. However, there was one problem. Authorities could never prove he had poisoned the Tylenol capsules. There were no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no physical evidence linking him to the murders. Despite years of investigation, prosecutors never had enough evidence to charge him with the killings. The hunt continued, but the identity of the killer remained a mystery. As the years passed, the investigation gradually slowed. No additional poisoned Tylenol bottles connected to the original murders were ever found. The killings had stopped, but the mystery remained. Investigators preserved every piece of evidence, hoping that future advances in forensic science would finally reveal the killer. Over the decades, the case was reopened several times. New technology allowed detectives to re-examine fingerprints, DNA, and other evidence. But every investigation ended the same way. No suspect could be linked to the murders beyond reasonable doubt. Many theories emerged over the years. Some pointed to a lone killer. Others suggested someone with scientific knowledge. But none of those theories could ever be proven. More than 40 years later, the Tylenol poisonings remain one of the most famous unsolved murder cases in American history. 7 innocent people lost their lives. A nation was forever changed, and the person responsible has never been brought to justice. The killings ended in 1982, but their impact never did. Before the Tylenol poisonings, few people questioned the safety of products sitting on store shelves. That changed overnight. The murders exposed a dangerous flaw in consumer safety and forced the pharmaceutical industry to act. Tamper-evident packaging, foil seals, protective shrink wrapping, and safety caps soon became the new standard. Many of the safety features we see on medicine today exist because of this case. Johnson & Johnson's nationwide recall of more than 31 million bottles also became one of the most respected examples of crisis management in business history. The company chose to put public safety ahead of profit, helping restore confidence during one of the darkest moments in consumer history. Although the industry changed forever, one thing never did. The identity of the killer remained a mystery. More than 40 years later, the Tylenol poisonings remain one of America's most haunting unsolved murder cases. 7 innocent people lost their lives after doing something millions of us still do today, taking medicine they believed was safe. No one has ever been convicted of the murders. Investigators have revisited the evidence for decades, hoping new technology would finally provide answers. But the mystery remains. The victims left behind more than a tragic story. Their deaths changed consumer safety, transformed product packaging, and reshaped how companies respond during a crisis. Their legacy continues to protect millions of people every single day. 7 lives lost, a nation changed forever, an investigation that spanned decades, and a question that still remains unanswered. Who poisoned the Tylenol? Maybe one day, someone will uncover the missing piece. Maybe the answer still exists somewhere inside an old file, an overlooked detail, or a secret carried for decades. But until that day comes, the Tylenol murders remain one of the most chilling unsolved cases in American history. Because sometimes, the most terrifying crimes aren't committed in dark alleyways. They don't require masks. They don't require weapons we can see. Sometimes, they hide in ordinary places, waiting quietly until trust becomes tragedy.